History is filled with wars fought over land, power, faith, and pride. Battles that reshaped empires and conflict that ended civilizations. But every once in a while, history gives us a story to add salt, so human that it reminds us how fragile war truly is. This is the event of a war that didn't end with treaties or total victory, but with wine, ale, and staggering soldiers who forgot why they were fighting. A war sparked by tension, pride, and misunderstanding, and ended because no one could stand straight long enough to continue. Today, on Echoes of Time TV, this is the war that history almost laughed into silence. On Christmas Day 1914, in the cold, muddy trenches World War I Western Front, a true miraculous event occurred. For a few brief hours, opposing soldiers, British, French, Germans, and Austrians, in the no man's land of France and Belgium, declared their own ceasefire. They laid down their arms, climbed from the trenches, and shared their carols, food, and even games of football. The Christmas Truce remained one of the most hopeful moments of the Great War, or any war thereafter. In the 4 years of World War I, between 1914 and 1918, over 25 million were killed or wounded on both sides, estimatedly. Yet, there was still an unexpected moment of joy and hope in the battlefield trenches during the first Christmas of World War I in 1914. Some two-thirds of the troops, about 100,000 men on both sides, are believed to have spontaneously participated. But what actually happened to precipitate the famous Christmas truce? It's still a question. By the winter of 1914, the terrible Western Front stretched thousands of miles across Flanders in Belgium, a border region with France. By December, the men were now very familiar with the harsh realities of the battlefield. Any idealism they had carried into war the summer before was long gone. They were told by their commanders it would be over by Christmas. Yet, here they were, still cold, muddy, and ready to kill the enemy at a moment's notice. It will interest you to know that Pope Benedict XV called for a Christmas truce in 1914, but the idea was quickly rejected by commanders on both sides. Then, on Christmas Eve, December 24th, several weeks of miserable soaking rain was replaced by a thick, hard frost, creating a light dusting of snow along the front. It made the men on both sides feel that something truly spiritual had taken place amongst the hell of war. It was enough to motivate troops to simultaneously initiate a temporary truce on their own. The first signs that something unusual was happening occurred after a dark on the night before Christmas. Captain Otto O'Sullivan of the British Army's Royal Irish Rifles was stationed in Rue de Bois, France. He heard a German accent float from across the barracks. It said, "Do not shoot after 12 o'clock, and we will not do so either. Then, if you English come out and talk to us, we won't fire." One Irish rifleman ventured out of his trench to test the invitation. After arriving back safely with a German cigar as a gift, others made their way onto the steep battlefield, no man's land filled with soldiers meeting each other halfway, and so began the unofficial Christmas truce of 1914. Around 8:30 p.m., an Irish officer reported to headquarters saying, "Germans have illuminated their trenches with dozens of candles, are singing songs and are shouting Happy Xmas to us. Compliments are being exchanged, but I'm nevertheless cautious." Most accounts say the truce began with that spontaneous singing of Christmas carols, with the lyrics, "It was a beautiful moonlit night, frost on the ground, white almost everywhere." One British private recalled, "He was sad to be spending Christmas Eve shivering in the muck, miles from home, fighting the Germans just a mere 100 feet away. They crouched together in long trenches just 6 feet deep and 3 feet wide. Each day was marked with constant fear, store biscuits, and soggy cigarettes. It seems the only chance of getting home was in an ambulance or a coffin." About 10 p.m. that night, other British troops noticed an odd sound. A Away across the field, among the dark shadows beyond, I could hear the murmur of raised voices. The Germans were singing Christmas carols. Another soldier wrote, first, the Germans would sing one of their carols, and then we would sing one of ours, until we started up with the lyrics, O come, all ye faithful. Then the German joined in singing the same in Latin, Adeste Fideles. And I thought to myself, well, this was really most extraordinary. Two nations both singing the same carol in the middle of a war. Further along the line, the two sides serenaded each other with carols. First, the Germans, Silent Nights, was met with a British, the first Noel. The night wore on to dawn, a night made easier by joviality and Christmas carols from both sides. Not a shot was fired. The dawn arrived crisp, clear, and cold. What happened next would shock the world and forever make history. In the British sector, troops noticed the Germans had placed small Christmas trees along parapets of their trenches. All down our line, they came to our ears, a greeting unique in war. English soldiers, a Merry Christmas, a Merry Christmas. Then voices added, come out, English soldiers, come out to us. For some time they were cautious and did not even answer. Officers, fearing treachery, ordered the men to be silent, but up and down their line, they heard the men answering Christmas greetings from the enemy. One soldier wrote, how could we resist wishing each other a Merry Christmas, even though we were at each other's throats yesterday and would be the next? You come halfway, and we shall come halfway, the British soldiers replied. A message was sent back saying, if you do not fire at us, we will not fire at you. Enemy soldiers began to climb apprehensively out of their trenches to meet unarmed in the pot-marked no man's land that separated the two armies. Normally, the British and German fired bullets across the tangles of barbed wire, the only occasional ceasefire to collect their dead. But now, there were handshakes and words of kindness. Slowly, greater parties of men from both sides began to venture into the space that separated them, until literally hundreds of each side were out in no man's land shaking hands. A Scots guard wrote that he met a German private who offered him a drink of schnapps and a cigar. The soldiers traded songs, tobacco, and booze, joining in a spontaneous holiday party in the chilly morning. Descriptions of the Christmas truce appear in several letters of the time. During the early part of the morning, the Germans started shouting all in good English, have you a spare of butter? We will meet you in the middle. In other trenches, German held up signs reading, you no shoot, we no shoot. Over the course of the day, troops exchanged gifts of cigarettes, food, buttons, and even hats. In the words of Captain Robert Myers of the King's Shropshire Light Infantry, they came towards us, and our chaps went out to meet them. We did not fire that day, and everything was so quiet. It seems like a dream. He continued, here we are laughing and chatting to men whom only a few hours before we were trying to kill. We were having the most extraordinary Christmas day imaginable. A sort of unarranged and quite unauthorized but perfectly understood and scrupulously observed truce exists between us and our friends in front. The funny thing is, it only seems to exist in this part of the battle line. On our right and left, we can all hear them firing away as cheerfully as ever. The Christmas truce also allowed both sides to finally emerge and bury their dead comrades, whose bodies had lain for weeks rotting in the cold mud of no man's land. There were even numerous accounts describing men helping enemy soldiers collect and carry their dead away. And it wasn't confined to anyone on the battlefield. The same basic ceasefire sprung up spontaneously at other points. Pockets of French, German, Austrian, and British troops held impromptu ceasefire across the Western Front. Thousands spent Christmas Day mingling with their enemies. The event has been seen as a true miracle, a rare moment of peace during a war that would ultimately claim over 15 million lives. Just how many soldiers that participated is hard to say, but over 100,000 may have taken part, along at least two-thirds of trench line that scarred Belgium and France. There are several mentions of impromptu kick-about and even a few organized matches. One British fighter described an icy pitch where a ball appeared from somewhere. We made up some goals and then it was just a general kickabout, as you think there were about a couple of hundred taking part. The German soldiers also described a pickup football game. The English brought a soccer ball from their trenches, and a lively game ensued. How marvelously wonderful, yet strange it was. Christmas, the celebration of love, managed to bring mortal enemies together as friends, if only for a time. In another recollection, everybody seemed to be enjoying themselves. There was no sort of ill will between us. There was no referee and no score, no tally at all, nothing like former soccer. Communication was difficult, but football by then was played professionally in Britain and Germany for decades. It was likely inevitable that, freed from the claustrophobic trenches, they would take pleasure in a simple kickabout. German Saxons played a game against Scottish troops. Eventually, this developed into a football match with helmets laid out as goals. A Scotsman wrote, "It was hard to play on the frozen ground, but we kept to the rules. Despite the fact that we were all amateurs, we played with huge enthusiasm. The game ended 3-2 for Fritz, that's the German. Another legendary match was played between the British and the German, refereed by a regimented priest, which the German claimed to have won 3-2 as well. A historian by name Alan Wakefield said, "If it happened, and there are very few collaborative accounts, there is second, third-hand accounts of somebody hearing of a game going on somewhere. However, if you are keeping score, those who heard about it happening said the game ended 3-2 for the Germans." The military's official history insists that no match took place because it would have been most unwise. When the truce spontaneously broke out, the leaders on both sides were reportedly horrified and incensed. Commanding officers sent orders that all football games must stop. Top command issued subsequent orders that it should never happen again, and generals should explicitly prohibit any friendly intercourse with the enemy. Men reluctantly returned to their trenches at dusk, and for the most part, the peace was preserved until midnight. One Irish infantryman had become friends with a German artilleryman who spoke English, and said as they parted, "Today, we have peace. Tomorrow, you fight for your country. I fight for mine. Good luck." What stands out are these memories the soldiers preserved in their own writing. Looking back on it all, I would not have missed that unique and weird Christmas day for anything. In 1914, this curious holiday reminded all those involved that wars were fought not by military forces but by human beings. Indeed, one British soldier said, "I came to the conclusion that if we had been left to ourselves, there would never have been another shot fired. And of course, it was only ever a truce, not peace." Many generals and senior officers were not on board with this overall show of goodwill. In some areas, peace lasted until the first few days of 1915 without many shots fired. The military made it clear that this was not acceptable wartime behavior. Another holiday truce of this kind was never recorded. Fighting did not occur on Christmas in some areas. Corporal Clifford Lane of H Company, Hertfordshire Regiment, explained that upon seeing some Germans emerge from the trenches with lanterns, he was ordered to open fire. The Germans did not reply to our fire and carried on with their celebrations. Corporal Lane remembered, "They ignored us and were having a very fine time indeed, and we continued in our wet trenches trying to make the most of it." He later regretted not engaging in the truce with the Germans. "It would have been a good experience," he said. Indeed, though attempts were made to enact holiday truces in 1915 and 1916, The world had grown so bitter by then that any ceasefire were short-lived at best. The war continued and there would be no further Christmas truces until the final armistice at 11 p.m. on November 11, 1918. Many of the thousands who celebrated the Christmas truce would not live to see that final peace. But for those who did survive, the truce was something they would never ever forget. A century later, the Christmas truce remains a testament to the power of humanity in one of the darkest hours of our history. It's been immortalized and fictionalized in numerous books, songs, and movies. It speaks to the deep human desire for peace, no matter how fleeting it may be. To mark the centennial in 2014, Britain's Prince William unveiled a memorial in Staffordshire, a large circular metal frame representing a soccer ball with two bronze hands clasped tightly inside it. In the end of the truce, no glorious conquest was claimed, no empire truly rose or fell. The weapons were lowered, not by reason, not by mercy, but by exhaustion and intoxication. The soldiers went home nursing headaches instead of wounds, and history quietly closed the chapter on a war that proved something timeless, that behind every uniform is a human being, capable of courage, cruelty, and complete foolishness. In a world where wars are remembered for bloodshed and tragedy, this strange conflict reminds us that sometimes the greatest enemy isn't the opposing army, but ourselves. And as the echoes of this forgotten war fade into time, one truth remains. Not every war ends with victory. Some end when humanity stumbles back into itself. Thank you for watching.